Chapter 6. Joseph drove to the hospital, following the ambulance. He then met up with the police who were at the hospital for the second time. Joe finished up a quick debriefing, consisting of how he knew Kevin and how he knew that a few people were after him for the bills he owed them, that Kevin was an addict and so on. The police wanted confirmation that Kevin owed a few people and that Kevin asked him for a few dollars to help him out a while ago. Joe neglected to tell the police that most likely it was Omar who put the 2 bullets in Kevin's chest. Joseph neglected this on purpose. Joe watched Kevin being rushed into surgery, then with a deep tired sigh, he went downstairs to see his mom. Joseph found his mother's room and entered. He entered expecting to see Danny. He did find his mother sleeping, but Danny was not there. Joe sat there for a while. It was now getting late in the evening and he was so very tired. Where was Danny? Joe thought to himself. Why was he always looking after his family? Why couldn't he just let them all go and live his own life? He had already missed several classes. He could not miss too many more even with the kind of circumstances his family, page 75, was in now. Joseph pushed his thoughts away. He would think about it all later, for now he needed to eat. Joe left the room, left the hospital and found a dinner that happened to be open all day and all night. He sat down and the waitress walked over. She gave him a menu, with a pen and pad in the other. "Hello there, would you first like something to drink?" Joseph looked up at her, picked up the menu, and then looked outside to his car. The night sky and the rain. Joe unfolded the menu. Coffee. She nodded, smiling, "You got it," then left to get the pot of coffee and a cup. Again he remembered how tired he was and hungry. Joe thought about the rain, his mind drifting back to when he was a kid. It was only recently that he had managed to get a car. Joe remembered how when he was young his mom and he used to walk to get groceries. How they were caught in the rain once or twice. He remembered how people used to pass them by on the road. They used to drive by dry and warm, never really stopping to ask if they needed a ride. Maybe everyone was just in their own little world and wanted it to stay that way. The world, Joe had found out, was a scary place sometimes, and it seemed the majority of people he met just wanted to keep themselves behind self-constructed walls. The waitress returned, pouring him a cup of coffee while asking him, "Would you like to order now?" Joseph nodded, briefly looking over the menu. "I will have that steak and eggs thing." The waitress finished pouring his cup of coffee, left creamer for him, took the menu smiling, "Okay, steak and eggs it is," and left him again to think. Joe opened a few of the creamers, pouring them into his coffee. He took a spoon and blankly stirred the cup of coffee. Maybe he needed to just grow up himself, Joe, page 76, thought to himself. Who did not have issues with their families? Somehow, it seemed that he was missing something. Maybe that something was just the acceptance that life had unknowns in it and he just could not answer everything. Would he even want to answer all of them? Did he have to put it in words? Must a person always try to find a hole for every peg? Joe took a sip of coffee. It was strong, but still quite good. Joseph thought he needed to be satisfied more with the simple things that life gave him every day: a cup of coffee, some eggs, steak, and a cooling fall rain on his car. He closed his eyes for a moment and then the steak and eggs came. The waitress placed the meal in front of him. Smiling again, "Here is your steak and eggs," then handing him a bottle of ketchup. "Anything else?" Joe smiled at the dinner. He looked sleepily at her. "No, thanks. I am good for now. The waitress pleased, okay, let me know. Then turning, you nodded off there. For a moment, you okay? Joe cut into the steak. Yes, long night, my mother and my friend are both in the hospital. The waitress, hearing this, about to leave his table for another, came back for a moment. Oh, I hope they are okay. Joseph nodded. Yes, everything is fine. Perhaps it was a lie, perhaps not. Kevin may not have made it through the surgery. And with that sobering fact, Joe could not help but think of how fortunate he was to be alive, to simply enjoy the taste of a steak. He told Kevin to stop using. He told him many times. There was just nothing more he could do until he went back to the hospital. Joe thought uncomfortably about life, death, and the frailness of being human. He thought. Page 77. About how they used to say grace when he was a young kid. Joe could not remember why they had stopped, or when they had stopped eating together, for that matter. He felt uneasy, but thankful for the food he had and to be alive. Joseph closed his eyes, half asleep, and for the first time in a very long time, he said grace. He thanked God for the food in front of him, which he could afford to buy and enjoy it, because he was alive. The surgeon came out to meet with Joe, who was in the waiting room. He gave a sad look at him. I am sorry, but your friend did not make it. Joseph looked up at him, a crushing weight of sorrow entering his chest. But why? The surgeon showed him literally by pointing to himself. The bullets pierced the superior vena cava and the subclavian artery, here, he said, pointing to his shoulder. Although we were able to stop the bleeding, he had lost so much blood that he went into severe shock. Joe looked at the television in the upper corner of the waiting room and then blankly at the surgeon. Oh. The surgeon took a deep breath. Do you know his parents? Joseph looked down at the tile floor. Yeah, I know his mother. The surgeon nodded. Will you be here a while? Joe nodded, looking up blankly again. My mom is downstairs, room 214, yes. The surgeon gave a weak smile to Joseph. Okay, good. A case manager will meet with you downstairs. Page 78. Joe sat in front of his mother's bed. It was morning and he was there to see her open her eyes, smile, sit up and eat a bit. They had her back on her medications. It was nice to see her more vibrant and in good spirits. Joe tried to hide the grief he was going through with Kevin and the fact that he now knew the cancer his mother had returned. This time spreading. The cancer had metastasized. For now Joseph was grateful he was there with her and that she was fully aware, happy. She ate her eggs. Joe, it is so good to have you here with me. Joseph smiled, sitting next to her. Yepper, Mama. How has school been? Joe popped the lid off his mother's warm cereal. Okay, very good. Mama Cruse picked up her decaffeinated coffee, sipping it and frowning. Mama is so very proud of you. Joseph caught the frown. What's wrong, Mama? She put the cup down. It's fake coffee. Joe laughed, smoothing his mother's hair down. How do you know? She smiled wisely. I can tell, nosing. Joe pointed to the warm cereal. You should eat your oatmeal. Mama Cruse gave another frown. I would rather have a real cup of coffee and something sweet. Then sitting up further in her bed, leaning over to her son, do Mama a favor, get her a real cup of coffee and a donut. Joseph smiled again. Ah, I wish I could, but none till you get home. Page 79. Mama Cruse, disheartened a bit, fell back a bit on her pillows. Where is your brother? Joseph took the oatmeal and began eating it himself. He began thinking about Kevin and his mother, then heartache overwhelming him again. Joe turned to think about his brother. What the hell was going on, he thought. I don't know, Mom. I just don't know. Joseph drove over to their trailer, quickly looked inside to see if Danny was there, and then left again. Joe needed to find his brother, but where should he even start to look for him? Donna was driving fast down the road, her Thunderbird flying down the highway. Danny was beside her, looking out the passenger window, which was slightly open to let fresh air inside the car. Donna fumbled for a pack of cigarettes, then shaking a bit she placed one in her mouth and lit it. She took a puff, glancing at Danny, who's still looking out his window. Danny, you know we got to go to my friend Jake. Danny turned to her and nodded, yepper, sure. You said you got like what my mom got and dash. Donna took a deep inhale of the cigarette, interrupting him. Jake has the money for the operation. He has it and you just stand by me there, when we get there. Danny a bit concerned, yes, Donna, then thinking about his mother, are you going to be okay? Mama is not too good. Donna gave a quick, but hesitant smile at Danny. Yes. Page 80. Danny smiled back, giving her a big grin. Okay, then, I need to see my mama soon, Donna. Donna nodded. I will drop you off at the hospital this afternoon. Danny thought for a moment, maybe he should have let Joe to buy him that cell phone he wanted him to have. Then Danny had an idea. Donna, what about your cell phone? Donna in deep thought, throwing her half-finished cigarette through the open driver's side window. Oh, you can call him when we're done, not right now though. Honey. Danny nodded, in part agreement and in part question. Okay. Jake had just come home from a business meeting. He took his suit jacket off, took his tie off and headed for the mini bar. He found the refrigerator and made himself a drink, scotch and water. He put some ice in it and sat on the couch, flicking on his wide screen television. It was good to be king, Jake thought to himself. He opened the small door of his coffee table. He shuffled the contents of the drawer for a moment, found a little box, opened that and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He took it out and closed the drawer. Jake began to unfold the paper, but just then was interrupted by the sound of someone pulling into his driveway. By the sound of the engine, it was Donna. He tossed the paper onto the table, took a sip of his drink and answered the door. There was Donna and a rather expansive man next to her. Donna smiled weakly. Hello, Jake. Donna, Jake said as he opened up the door for them, who is your friend? Page 81. Danny smiled as they both walked in. Name is Danny, holding out his hand. Danny. She smiled nervously at Danny and then at Jake. A good friend. He is here to help me out and keep an eye on me. Jake thought it a bit odd, but not thinking much of the statement. Come in, sit down both of you. Danny agreeably, sure thing, sir, with all three of them sitting around the coffee table. Danny sat next to Jake while Donna sat in a chair next to Danny. Jake sat and then stood back up, pointing. Anyone want a drink? Danny was about to say yes, but Donna interrupted him. No, we need to talk and then go. Oh, okay, Jake said, frowning and then sitting back down. He picked up his drink and sipped it gingerly. What do you need, Donna? Anything we have gone over before. Danny began to look around the room, the expensive lamps and tables. He looked at the coffee table and at the little white paper packet. Jake, finding Danny eyeing the piece of paper, scooped it up with his hand and tossed it back into the table's small drawer. Donna nodded, brushing her long hair back, crossing her legs. I need you to help me. Help Omar. Jake gave a hearty laugh. Omar. Why do you bring him up, as if I should even know him? Danny turned to look at Jake, laughing. He said nothing, but Donna did. He needs cash, and put it bluntly, if he goes your mess goes with it. Page 82. Jake laughed a bit again, sipping his drink. Yeah, what mess? I will see to it you lose it all. You will lose your access, your reputation, and me as well. Jake put the drink down and stood. Well, you I can afford to lose. Danny watching them intently. Lose what? Donna is not feeling well. Never mind, Danny, Donna said tepidly to him, then angrily to Jake, as Jake raised questioning eyebrows to Donna with what Danny had just said. Let me be clear, I need 10 grand and I need it by next week. Jake, disgusted and coughing, you know you're a piece of work and you always were just a whore. I should have left you wallowing with that old pimp of yours. Donna pulled Danny up by the hand. I got Danny here. He keeps a close eye on me and he does favors for me if I ask him to, right Danny? Danny nodded, sure I do Donna, and then looking right at him, I would do anything for Donna, Mr. Jake. Jake eyed the large man. You will get it by next week, sipping his drink. Now leave and close the door behind you. Donna took Danny by the hand and just before they left, she turned to Jake and matter of fact spoke. I am a prostitute and you're a John. Always remember that, Jake. I did what I needed to do, you did what you wanted to. Jake closed the door behind Donna and Danny, then sat back down on his couch. He took a deep drink of his scotch, found that small paper in the coffee table drawer, opened it and inhaled the contents. Jake leaned back, closed his eyes for a minute or two. Page 83. Then sat up and found the phone next to him on the couch. Jake picked it up and dialed a rarely used number. He waited for a moment and a terse discussion began. Jake finished his drink and added, hey, you know Charles, driving is a bitch these days and everyone has accidents. Joseph made his way over to Cruse Tavern. He had a strong hunch Mike might know where his brother was. Joe thought to himself as he drove in the now cooling late summer air. It would be officially fall soon. Joe needed to get back to school, but first he needed to get his mother home and get Danny to take a bit more responsibility for himself and their mother. He felt conflicted about having Danny, he supposed, burdened with his mother, although Joseph tried to convince himself that the term burdened was not such a bad one considering Mama was their mama. Joe did love them both, and after all, he did see her at her worst many times and yet still took good care of her and Danny. Nevertheless, Joseph, brooding in thought, Danny needed just a bit more maturity. He knew that Danny could help their mother and take care of the house if he tried. He had seen Danny's work before. He had seen Danny learn to read and figure out the balance of a checkbook. Joe had seen Danny even drive okay, though he did not have a permit or license. Joe let him drive the back roads a bit when he could. Joe thought about how he should have bought Danny that cell phone he saw when it was on sale that time. Small oversights can get the better of any situation, but no one is perfect, least of all him, Joseph thought. He pulled his Buick into the parking lot of Cruse Tavern. There were a few cars, but one of them was not Donna's. Joe closed the car door behind him and entered the tavern. There he found Mike serving a few people. Michael seemed to instantly spot Joseph and smiled. Hey, Joe. How are you? Page 84. Joseph sat down at the bar, Mike meeting him after serving a few people at the tables. "Hey, I did not expect you home, what's new?" Joe frowned. "Everything, I need a beer too." Mike nodded, you bet, giving a fatherly pat on Joe's back, then going behind the bar to pour his beer. As he was pouring Joe's beer, "How is your brother?" Joseph shrugged, "That is what I would like to know. I am trying to track him down." Michael came over with his beer, placing it on a coaster and in a lower voice. Leaning over to Joseph, "I thought he might be gone, that is why I asked. He may be out with his friend a lot." Joe looked up at the TV and for the first time in a while it was turned off. "Yeah, I thought of that. She seems to want something from him, but I don't know what." Mike rubbed his white beard thoughtfully, scratching it. "Well, Joe, you know, trying to read minds is hard work. People need and want various things, sometimes they don't even know what they want. They try to find it, but it takes time and it takes a lot of soul searching. Do you want to know more, Joe?" Joseph seemed surprised at the question, taking a deep drink of his beer. It was nice and cold, refreshing to him. "Well, sure, Mike, of course." Mike leaned over again. "I may be wrong, but people want to know about themselves, want to grow and heal. So, they go and search for answers outside of themselves. They really need to find what they want by searching within themselves, on the inside. You need to find yourself on the inside first. She may not know what she wants," then pausing for a moment, "Joe, you need to find out what you want out of life. Page 85. And go for it. You're too young and too smart to let all the outside stuff distract you, then you go around the mountain over and over again. Don't do it, you don't need to." Mike and Joe talked a bit more. He finished his beer, which was on the house, and went over to the trailer hoping to find Danny there. Joseph did happen to find Danny there. He was sitting on the couch watching television with a box of donuts in his lap and a quart of milk by his side. He gave Joe a big smile as he entered the trailer. "Jojo, I am glad to see you." Joe found a seat and wearily sat down, exhausted. "Yeah, I am glad to see you too." Danny took a donut and reached out to hand it to Joe. "Want a donut?" Joseph figured, why not? "Yeah." Danny gave it to him, and as Joe ate it, "Donna has been real nice to me." Then, questioning, "Where is Mama?" "Still at the hospital." Joe swallowed some of the donut, his mouth dry, being a bit exasperated by the whole situation. "Yes, and why did you not stay there like I told you to?" Danny shrunk back a bit. "Well, Jojo, I was there a long time and I got hungry. Real hungry, and Mama kept sleeping. She was okay, the doctors told me, and I was real hungry, then Donna found me. I don't know how, but then she wanted to get me something to eat." Joe had enough of that logic. "Okay, Danny, okay." Danny still apologizing. "I was real hungry, Joe. I mean really hungry." Page 86. Joseph leaned back and then tilting his head back on the living room chair. "I know, Danny, I know. I am your brother, don't forget, filling that stomach of yours is near impossible." Upon hearing that, Danny gave a hearty laugh. "You're always funny, Joe." Joe sat up again. "Listen, I have to get back to school. Mama is coming home tomorrow and I need you to promise you will take care of her a bit while I am gone." Danny nodded. "Sure thing, Jojo." Joe needed a bit more convincing. "I need you to promise to me you will take a bit better care of her and call me if you have any problems at all, okay?" Danny nodded again, drinking milk while he did so. "Sure, I promise, Joe." "Joe, anything for you, Jojo," wiping his mouth with his hand. "I love Mama." Joe gave a weak smile. "I know you do, make sure she takes her medicine too." "Sure, Jojo. And try not to spend time with Donna," Joseph added. A group of men waited out on the corner near Omar's apartment, a couple of them smoking. Omar and Susan were anxiously watching television. He thought about playing his video games, but could not concentrate. He was drinking heavily, sitting on the edge of his couch, while Susan was now at the end of her second pack of cigarettes, half off. The love seed. Susan looked inside her pack, angrily. "Omar, we can't just hide out here forever." Omar emptied the beer in his hand. He was developing a collection next to him. Page 87. Near the couch. "We don't know who is out there. Why don't we wait for a while longer? It's still not that late." Susan rubbed out one of her last cigarettes in the ashtray, which was on the end table next to her. "You know," sighing deeply, "you know you got yourself into this. You need to get yourself out, not me. You know I need you, baby." Susan sat back, pulling out her last cigarette from her last pack. She was so tired. Her mind flashed back to high school and one of her first boyfriends, Deshaun. "You know, Omar, I had it going on and you wrecked my life." Deshaun was a good man. He went to college. He got his master's degree and now he was married with 2 kids. Omar had a feeling. He knew now what was to be them. How did he lose his way? But baby please. Susan could have been with Deshaun. She had wanted to go to college with him. But Omar came along, had some money, a place, and a nice car. What for? From what she heard, Deshaun's family lived on a couple acres in the Hamptons. "You know, Omar, I took the wide road, the shortcuts. It's my fault. I listened to all your bullshit. You talked good and all, but you had your part too." As she stood up, grabbing her purse, Omar pleaded. "But, baby please, I'll make it right. I will, you'll see." Susan went to the door. "I don't want no more of anything you have to offer. I did try to convince you to make more of your life. You could have done it." Susan left Omar's apartment. Down the steps she went and closed the second. Page 88. Building door behind her, instinctively locking it as she went. It was dark out. Her car was parallel parked down the street. There was a small group of guys midway between her and where her car was parked. She took a deep breath. There wasn't anyone on the street, although lights could be seen from the various apartments downtown. Susan clutched her purse and took a shallow breath. Breathing rapidly, putting her head down, Susan went on. Crossing their path, they eyed her as she moved through the group. One of them brushed up against her, but then they let her through. Not looking back, Susan stepped to her car, quietly opened her driver's side door and then sunk deep into her seat. She could see the group in dark shadows before her. She quickly inhaled another shallow breath and swallowed hard, starting the car, locking the door and driving off, passing them. Her car lights exposing them, from the shadow to light. It seemed they had blood in their eyes, watching her as she drive off. She locked her car doors, fumbled with her cell phone and pulled it out. Holding it in one hand, Susan went to call Omar, but then she hesitated. She briefly looked at her phone and then at the road. Susan swallowed again, and then, for many reasons, many she did not even know about consciously, she tossed the phone to the passenger side seat and cried. Heavy tears. Omar finished another beer. He gave it a look and then placed it next to the other empties. There were about 12 now next to his couch. As Omar did so, he could hear hard knocking on the downstairs door. Startling him, he knocked the empty beers over, the sound of glass against glass crackling in the stale apartment air. Could it be Susan, he thought to himself. However, the knocking only came harder and heavier this time. Omar, now full of fear, went to stand up, but in his drunken stupor, he tripped over one of the legs of his coffee table, hitting the floor, his head hitting the glass of his. Page 89. Entertainment Center. The glass shattered, cutting his scalp and his face. Omar groaned. Holding his face, blood dripping through his fingers as the group of men sent after him broke the front door down. He could hear them rushing up the stairs. Quickly, Omar pulled himself up and went to find his pistol. But there was no time as they rammed the upstairs door. He ran for the bedroom, still holding the side of his face. The men broke through as Omar stumbled to his bedroom window. He opened the window and spilled out of his apartment onto the building's fire escape. One of the men reached him first, grabbing Omar from inside his apartment. "Come here, you motherfucker." Omar kicked at his face, blooding his nose. The man yelped in pain, releasing his grip on Omar. Omar stumbled down the fire escape, now with the rest of the men after him. Down the steps, Omar fled, tripping and falling. He tumbled down the remaining steps, missing the first floor ladder and falling. Hitting the alley sidewalk hard, Omar felt and heard his leg snap. It had cracked itself below the knee, the spiral fractured bone piercing through his skin, under his pants. The group of men climbed down the first floor ladder and surrounded him. One of the bigger men picked Omar up, who was now limp, in pain. "Come here, you deadbeat." Omar struggled. "No, please," the man then hitting him with his fist back down to the ground. The group picked him up, dragging him into the corner of the alley, the darkest spot. It smelled of urine, feces, and rotting food. There they beat him without mercy. When they were finished, one of them pulled out a pistol, and a .22 caliber bullet was lodged neatly into his brain. There, in the darkest of alleys, on the darkest of nights, Omar was left to die in the piss and shit of his own making. Chapter 7. Page 90. After class, Joseph and Trisha walked off campus to a small local restaurant. He wanted to get away a bit after what he had gone through at home and after the couple of tests he had taken unprepared when he went back to school. He could not help but think, what could you do? As they were seated, the waitress served them wine and took their order. There they sat opposite each other, a candle centerpiece flickering between them. The place had a few couples in it. The restaurant was quiet, romantic. He needed the peace, and the romantic part soothed his wounded heart. He sipped his glass wine. "So, Trisha, what has been going on with these classes since I have been gone?" Trisha looked at him a bit worried, but her eyes softened and became warm, the reflection of the candle flame dancing in her eyes. "Well, quite a lot. Labs were rough, and that technical writing class has been nothing but work for me." Joseph nodded. "Have you got a chance to see your mother since last time?" Trisha smiled, nodding as she sipped her glass of wine, flicking her hair back. "I had a whole bunch of laundry to do, so I took it home last weekend." Then her eyes showing concern again. "Joe, you know what happened to Kevin was not your fault." "No, but I should have known better. We grew up together. I mean, maybe I could have done more with him, kept him out of trouble." Trisha, a bit perturbed. "But, Joe, you can't parent everyone, you need to live your life." Joseph turned his head away, looking for a window that was not there. "I know. But people don't do what they're supposed to do. What is that, Joe? Page 91. They are supposed to act like adults, work to become better people, stay out of troubled, whatever. Trisha a bit angrily. Joe, you can't control people's lives, some people don't want to be helped. Joseph dismissive. I know that, Trish. Trisha now even angrier. Look, Joe, it just seems like your life revolves around your brother and your mother and everyone else who you have to rescue. Joe interrupting, now angry himself. So, what are you saying? I am some type of codependent dope? Trisha hurt. No, it's just you need to take care of yourself. You are carrying too many bricks on your back. It's hard for me to see you like this. The waitress served them, interrupting their argument, and then Joe continued as he ate his steak. It is too much for you, what about me? I have had to live it. Trisha taking a bite of her food. You know, you act like you're the only one who goes through things. Well, look at your friend Kevin. Joe now positively angry. I know. Kevin lived in a crack hole. He slept in garbage. Trisha now pleading. I can't take this, Joe, you need to focus on yourself. Joe pushing his plate away. That is the whole fucking problem. Everyone wants to focus on themselves. You know, no one wants to talk about anything, nothing. No one wants to talk about mental illness, mental retardation, no one wants to talk about drug addiction. No one wants to talk about abuse, divorce, or poverty. We all walk out the page 92 door in the morning and put on our game faces and pretend like we all are wonderful, perfect, pretty people, with fake plastic lives, and nothing gets fixed because we never get around to being honest with each other. Trisha began to cry quietly. Joe, I need to think about us for a while. Joe got up from the table, pulling out his wallet. Well then, I am me, I will talk. And I will deal, if you or anyone else doesn't want to, or want to come along, taking money out and placing it on the table, then they don't need to cross the bridge with me. Then walking out of the restaurant. Trisha was sitting in her dorm room. She was reading one of her textbooks and generally studying for her classes. She found it hard because she was still upset about what was happening to her relationship with Joe and what was happening between Joe and his family. Her cell phone began to ring. She looked at it. It was Susan. She answered the phone hesitantly. Hello. Susan's voice cracked as she spoke in low tones. It's Susan. Trisha tossed a book from her lap to bed. I know. What is going on, Susan? You don't sound too good. Susan's voice was trembling. My boyfriend is gone. Trisha leaned back. What do you mean, gone? I mean they killed him, Trisha. Susan whisperer in horror. Who? What are you talking about? David's peoples. Page 93. Trisha held her head. What am I supposed to do? Who is David? You need to call the cops, Susan. Susan paused for a moment, then, David was his boss. My boyfriend was a dope dealer. He owed a lot of money to David and he was your boyfriend's friend, Kevin's dealer. Trisha stood up, now pacing the small room. What? I know, please Trisha. Omar put a hit out on him, on Kevin. Trisha placed an elbow on a dresser and held her head. Call the police like I am Susan. Goodbye, she said, hanging up the phone. Joseph was sitting at a bench under a tree, near the campus gym. He just sat there. In the evening breeze, as the sun set, the overhead campus lighting flickering to life. He sipped a cup of coffee, thinking about his mother, about how sick she was, then about Danny. Joe thought about how innocent his brother was and how he had too good a heart for the kind of world they lived in. Danny only got hurt when others just did not. Hell, the world was tough even for himself. Joe felt out of place and unequipped for what was happening in his life. He felt he had been unprepared by his mother and was angry about it. Joe took a deep breath to relieve the stress and his anger began to fade as the stars above began to wink into view one at a time. He took another sip of his coffee, his phone ringing. He picked it up. It was Trisha. He and Trisha were not really talking since their argument, but he was not one to keep grudges too long. He answered his cell phone. "Hey." Trisha spoke in a heavy concerned tone. "Joe, I need to talk to you about something really bad." Page 94. "How bad?" "Real bad, Joe, real bad." Joseph took another sip of his coffee, still not quite realizing just what they were going to talk about or how serious it would be. "Okay, tell me, Trish." Trisha held her breath for a minute and then as she let it out, "Joe, Kevin was set up by his dealer and now his dealer is dead." Joseph sighed, one hand sweaty clutching the phone, the other holding his head. It was all so unreal, he thought to himself. Tanya climbed up the fire escape to Omar's now vacant apartment. She mumbled to herself, "I always have to do this, if I get caught." She found the window to Omar's apartment, looked around, slowly lifted the window and then climbed in. The apartment was dark and a bit dank with a humid smell to it. She turned on a light, looking at the disheveled mess that was left behind from the hit. Tanya began to search for the missing money. According to what David told her, he was absolutely sure that even a fool such as Omar could not have pissed away that much money. He must have some of it left somewhere in the house. She, of course, looking at Omar from a slightly different angle, considered him a big enough fool to piss that much money away and more. Tanya looked under his bed, in his dresser, under his dresser and in his closet. She found David's lockbox buried under a pile of dirty clothes in the closet. Angrily, she opened the busted lockbox. It was empty. She cursed to herself quietly. Tanya continued to rummage through Omar's closet until she found another box. This time it was a small plastic container. She popped the lid off and inside found a stack of pictures. Tanya went to toss the container aside when she gave it a second glance. The top picture caught her eyes. It was a picture of Omar in a suite. She placed the plastic box on her lap, taking the page 95 picture out. Omar looked younger, must be from high school, Tanya thought to herself. Tanya began to look at the pile of pictures, another catching her eyes. It was a picture of him and his girlfriend at the time, at the beach, on the boardwalk. Tanya thought to herself, they look happy together. She didn't think Omar was very happy. Tanya continued to look through the pictures until she got to the last one. On the bottom of the pile was a picture of what seemed to be Omar's grandmother. Tanya held up the picture and sighed, thinking, where was she now? What happened to them all? Why did everything turn out wrong for them when they all were on the right track? Tanya ended her train of thought, refusing to answer the questions she brought up. She carefully placed the container aside and began searching the rest of the apartment. After what seemed to be an hour, Tanya left as she came, without the money, but with a somewhat different impression of Omar. Tanya came back, unlocking the door to David's apartment. She stepped in as David was reclining on his couch. He asked her impatiently, "Well, did you find the money?" She tossed her purse alongside the couch, pushing his feet off it and sitting where his legs had been. No, I did not. David, now angry as well, sat up. What do you mean you did not find it? Tanya gave David a stern look. Just what I said. David grabbed the warm beer that was on his coffee table. How could that fool spend it all? Tanya did not answer for a while, then she asked him. David, what did you do to? Page 96. Him. David took a sip of his beer, not quite knowing what the question meant. What do you mean? I did nothing to that fool. I mean, you basically took him out of high school and turned him into a dope dealer, for you. David glanced at her briefly, laughing. Me? I didn't do nothing to him. He came to me and wanted quick cash. You could have said no. David went to reach out to her with an arm. Hey, baby, you know I run a business. Tanya moved away from his embrace. Not a legit one. I make good. Tanya moved further away from him on the couch and then turned toward him. No, you don't. You make death, you kill people with rock and gat. If that is a business, then I don't know what is. David laughed again, a bit softer now and more reflective than dismissive. I need you to check Kevin's apartment too. Tanya frowned. Listen, you got other problems, David. David gave Tanya another smile. Yeah, how so? Tanya gave a faraway look, then looked down and finally at David. Susan told me she talked to her friend Trisha. She told me she knows you put a hit on her boyfriend's friend. Page 97. David furrowed his eyebrows. Really now? You are not legit, David, you're not. You just ain't, and I don't think you ever will be. Tanya climbed up the stairs to Kevin's apartment. There she found an older gentleman standing in the doorway of Kevin's apartment, looking over the mess that Kevin used to live in. Seeing Tanya, he gave a half smile, then a bit concerned. Are you one of Kevin's friends? Tanya looked sheepishly at him, nodding. Yeah, sure, who are you, his father? The man looked at her, then forlornly at the mess that was Kevin's previous life. No, thank goodness. I would have whipped his ass several times. He turned to her. Letting her into the apartment, if you could get away with that these days I am, was his landlord, but now I have to clean up the crap he left behind. Tanya moved some of the garbage around with the tip of one of her shoes, seeing a roach scurry away. You let him live like this? The man wiped a hand on his jeans. I gave him an eviction notice. He told me he needed a little more time, so I gave him a week more, but I guess he never needed it. Then catching up to the accusation, no, but people live like this all down here. They live like this and we rent to them. They destroy our apartments, don't pay any rent and leave the mess for us to clean up. Tanya shuffled through the wreckage of a young man's life. Then why do you rent down here? You don't need to own this building. Sell the building and buy one in the town, then you could rent to more so-called respectable people. Page 98. With that the landlord became a bit angry, turning to head out. As it is, I got to get trash haulers to get his crap out of here. Walking down the stairs, lock up as you leave. Now alone, Tanya found an overturned chair, turned it right side up and then sat in it. She looked over the expanse of ruin. A castle built on sand. Where could she even begin to start looking for the money? That is, if there even was any money to be found. There. She found a band in her pocket and pulled her hair back to keep it clean. Tanya picked up a blanket, a pillow without a pillowcase, the mattress, a few roaches and several ants scurrying back into the recesses. She found a dresser. Inside a drawer was a dime bag and a pipe. She looked in the closet, but hesitated to dig into the pile of clothes. Old papers, used food cartons and other more unusual collected items. Careful not to wipe her face with her hands, Tanya instead wiped her forehead with a forearm. She then made her way back to the chair and sat down again. She could not help but think, what am I doing? Danny flicked through the TV channels, preoccupied with thoughts of his mother, who was resting somewhat uneasy in the back bedroom. She had been complaining the last several days about pain and was not eating or drinking anything substantial. He needed to figure out how to make her eat more, but somehow a good idea on how just to do that escaped his mind. To Danny, she was getting quite ill. He had talked to his brother the other day and he had said that there was not much that he or Danny could do, but to try to get her to eat and drink more and call him if anything else happened. He did not quite understand why Joe would not give him more instructions but Danny, like a good brother, took his brother's word that he knew what he was doing. Danny drank his coffee. He could not find a baseball game on and instead found a college football game. Page 99. Danny began to watch it as his mother called for him, a bit weakly, from the back bedroom. Danny. Danny answered in sort of a meek howl from where he sat. Yes, Mama. His mother yelled for him a bit louder and with more concern. Danny, please. Danny heard the twinge of pain in her voice. Yes, Mama, I am coming, and hurried to her bedroom. She tried to sit up in her bed, struggling to do so. Danny, there you are. He sat next to her on her bed, helping her with her pillows and helping her sit up. Yes, Mama, you're still in a lot of pain? Huh, Mama. She looked at him with a bit of fear, then love, and finally a bit bravely. I am trying, son. I am trying. I hurt all over though. Danny grabbed both her hands and clasped them. I know, Mama. I wish I could help. Joe didn't think he could even help. She smiled a bit as Danny pet her hair, smoothing it back down. I know, Danny. But you can't, nor can Joseph. Danny seemed like he was about to cry, but then suppressed it down deep. If Joe can't help, then I can't. Mama Cruse coughed a bit. I want to tell you I love you. Danny looked away for a moment, then back to her. I know you do. She held a cough with a clenched fist to her mouth, then began again. I love you. And Joe both very much, and I am sorry I could not do more for you both. Page 100. Danny tried a weak smile. I know you do good, Mama. Mama Cruse gave into another cough. It was hard without Daddy. I tried to be both your mama and your father. I am sorry. Then coughing again, Danny holding her for a moment, letting her back down on the pillows. I am sorry I got sick. It was a lot for me. And the stress of raising two kids alone got to me. Danny did not quite understand all the words behind what she was saying, but understood all the feelings that went along with what Mama Cruse was saying. I know. Mama. She coughed again, this time in her hand, then glancing at it. Her hand had blood in it. Mama Cruse looked at him again in a bit of fear. Danny. Danny, seeing the blood, began to cry a bit. Mama, holding her. Mama Cruse grabbing Danny. Call your brother, let him know I am getting worse, but I am okay. Danny nodded his head in agreement and pulled away. He gave Mama Cruse a tissue to wipe her hands. To Danny, the two words worse and okay did not seem to fit together, but he would tell Joe what she said and also about the blood she was coughing up. Danny dialed the number to Joe's cell phone. He let it ring for a while and then it Went to his messaging system. Danny left a message telling his brother to call him back. Danny, now more concerned than before the phone call, sat down on a kitchen chair. He looked up at the kitchen clock. Danny thought that maybe Joe was in class. If that was the case, then he could try again in an hour. Danny thought that it was a good decision, yet. Page 101. Somehow the comfort of Joseph being in class as the reason for him not answering the phone did not ease his mind much. He anxiously watched the clock and waited. Danny could hear his mother coughing and his mind turned from her to Donna. What was she doing? Could she help him? Danny waited anxiously, watching the football game and then the clock. He tried not to think about calling Joe early, but after a half an hour he gave in and called. He went over to the kitchen wall, picked up the receiver and dialed Joe's number. Danny let it ring for a while and then hung up when the call transferred to his voicemail. Frustrated, Danny placed the phone back on the hook and thought for a minute. He picked the phone back up and dialed Donna. After a few rings, she answered. Hello. Danny spoke first in a broken tone. This is Danny. She spoke in warm tones, though with an undercurrent of concern. Hey, Danny. How are you? Danny rubbed his head, dragging the phone cord and receiver with him to the kitchen table. He sat heavily, not good, Donna. Mama is bad and Joe don't answer his phone. Well, how sick is she? He glanced back toward his mother's bedroom. Not good, she is coughing blood. Donna thought for a moment. Well, I am not doing too good either. I am starting to get sick like your mama. Danny's eyes widened in fright. What should I do? Donna thought some more. I tell you what, I will come over and we can. Page 102. Straighten things out. That money that Jake promised me will do us all good, get us all better. Danny rubbed his head again. Okay, Donna, whatever you need to get us all better. After an hour, more, Joe called up Danny. He found a spot on campus with a large tree and sat under it. Danny. Danny answered. Hey Jojo, where were you? I called and there was no answer. Joseph placed his book bag next to him. I know, I had a lab. Danny tried to understand. A lab. Joe leaned back on the tree, watching the unconcerned walk along one of the many campus roads in front of him. Some were walking alone, some holding hands and some in groups, many enjoying the fall sunshine and air. It is like a really long class, a couple of hours. Danny still not quite sure why Joe would have to take a class that long. Okay. Jojo, but Mama is real sick. She is coughing up blood. Joe pulled up his legs, wrapping one arm around his knees. She is coughing up blood. I am scared, Joe. What could Joseph do? What could he do when there was nothing he could do for his mother? Her cancer had metastasized, there was nothing they could do. The cancer, page 103, was terminal and nothing short of a miracle granted by Almighty God Himself could cure her. How could he make Danny understand that? How could he make Danny understand that even if he left school again and came home nothing would change? She was going to die and there was nothing Danny, he or the doctors could do about it. Now Joseph was faced with going home and withdrawing from his classes or looking like the bad guy, the cold-hearted son who stayed at school when in either case, the end result would be the same. He could do nothing to change the situation, either way he was fucked. Listen. Danny, take her to the hospital. Danny, call an ambulance and take her to the hospital. Want you to tell the doctors that if it gets critical for them to call me and I will come back. But I cannot do anything that the doctors can't do. In fact, the doctors can do much more than I can. I need you to do as I say, okay? Danny nodded. Right, take her to the hospital, but, Jojo, why can't you come home? I need you real bad, Mama needs you real bad. Joseph felt so bad, the rotten cold-hearted son. You could do everything you could. And more, and yet you still felt like you did nothing and meant it. Why? I know, take her to the hospital. Danny nodded, feeling quite abandoned. Okay, Jojo. Donna drove fast in her Thunderbird. She dialed Jake's number as she swerved a bit, the sound of loud music pumping from her car taking her and driving her anger. She had been without a hit for several days now that Omar was gone. She would have to find another connection, and yet she was too proud to walk the streets of Lower Greenberg like many of the other dope fiends in the dark of the night to get her score. She might have to resort to such a demise, Donna thought to herself. Hey, she answered as soon as Jake, page 104, picked up his phone. Yeah, what do you want from me this time, Donna? I want my money. Jake was sitting out near his pool. He would have to close it up for the season soon. You aren't getting shit from me. Donna took an exit off the highway and down the main thoroughfare she drove. Her anger beginning to boil, her hands beginning to shake. She took a glance at her hand. The one holding her cell phone, narrowly missing an oncoming car. The driver in the other car blared his horn. Donna drove on looking for the road that would lead to Danny's trailer. I want my money. You owe it to me and to Omar, and if I don't get it, my big friend, the one I took to your house, will gladly do what I say, which is to break you real hard. Jake, burning hot with anger, fuck you, hanging up the phone and throwing it into the pool, then with one hand tossing the table and the drink upon it aside, the glass shattering along his patio. Mama Cruse began to have a fit of coughing. She called out to Danny. Danny, please, get me some more tissues. Danny got up from the couch. He was still quite worried about his mother and yet still did not have any answers. He wanted to call the ambulance, but yet he was afraid to do it. Danny called back to his mother, "Coming, Mama," as he looked for a box of tissues. He did not find any, so he took a roll of toilet paper from the cabinet and brought it to her. There he found his mother with blood on her hands and on her bed sheets. Page 105. Danny shook from frayed nerves as he gave his mother the roll of paper. Mama, I have to call the ambulance. She started unrolling the paper and wiping herself down. No, Danny. Danny pleaded. But, Mama. Mama Cruse began coughing again as Danny ran to the phone in the kitchen. He dialed 911 and gave them the information they needed. Danny hung up the phone and waited for the ambulance to arrive. But, after a minute or two more of hearing his mother suffer and him being alone with her to hear it, he broke. Danny began to cry and in sobs. He stumbled to the door and left the trailer. He began to shake again, to think irrationally. He just needed to run, he thought. He just needed to leave. Danny could not think. Fear had taken over, loneliness had taken over. Danny thought of blood and death as he staggered down the street weeping, wiping his tears away. He heard a car down the road. And then he saw it, it was Donna's. She hit her brakes hard, squelching them. She pulled off to the side of the road, intersecting his path. Danny stopped and stood in front of Donna's car. He just stood there crying. Donna turned off her car, stepped out and hugged him. What are you doing crying out in the middle of the road? My mother is coughing up blood. She is dying, Donna, and the people aren't coming. Donna motioned for him to get in the car. Get in, who isn't coming? Both Danny and Donna got in the car, and as she pulled back onto the road to drive, the ambulance people and Jojo. She took the short remaining drive left to Danny's trailer. What? Okay, telling him to get out of the car as she stepped out. Come on, Danny, let's see what you're talking about, as an ambulance pulled up to the end of the trailer. Page 106. Don't Roll was standing near one of the several corner stores that dotted the inner lanes of Greenberg. He was trying to make good with the local gang and was still a bit uneasy about it all. Against his mother's wishes, he had dropped out of school and now was supported by another family, one tied to the street. He needed a way to get past being a BG. Of course, he waited for the opportunity, his anxiety about all of it heavy on his heart. That day opportunity did come by in the form of David. David drove up next to Don't Roll. He rolled the passenger window down. Hey kid, get in. Don't Roll opened the door and got in the car. David drove off and down the road. He gave him a glance while watching the road. You still AB.G, aren't you, kid? Don't Roll nodded. Yeah, so. David smiled. How old are you now? Don't Roll gave him a look. I am 17. David nodded. You need to qualify, my friend, and I need someone to catch cold. Don't Roll looked out the window suspiciously. Yeah, who? Tell you after you agree. I give you 10G, and if you get caught, you say nothing. If you do get tripped up, you'll be in juv, quick nap and you're out, plus no more BG. You'll be a full member, 10G even if you get tripped. Don't Roll looked at David and what he had on and around him. What do I have to do? Just say yes. Page 107. Chapter 8. Donna and Danny followed in her car behind the ambulance, which was taking Mama Cruse to the hospital. Danny was still sobbing a bit. I think she is going. Donna a bit consumed by withdrawal. Going where? Danny, unsure what to say, just looked out the window and mumbled something inaudible. Donna gave him a glance. What? Then when Danny did not answer, Danny. Dear, Donna is real sick too, just like your mama, but I can help take care of you and your family. But, again, I need your help, you know. Danny nodded, still looking out the passenger side window. Donna shook her head. Once they rushed Mama Cruse into the hospital and got her into an emergency room bed. Danny used Donna's phone to call his brother. Joseph's cell phone rang once, then twice, then he picked it. He saw the phone number and it did not look familiar. Hello. Danny turned away from both Mama Cruse and Donna, who were standing near. The nurse. Jojo, Mama is really bad. I did what you said. How bad? Danny, having never been exposed to so much in such a short a time, revealed the pain and fear through the tremble of the answer. Real bad, Jojo, very, very bad. Page 108. Donna is here too. Donna, hearing this, turned to him and briefly frowned. Joe looked at his cell phone for a second, then pressed it back to his ear, now very concerned. Donna was there, which only complicated the situation more. I will be there. It is going to take me a little while. Please, don't go anywhere. That includes going anywhere with Donna. The fall evening came early and the shroud of autumn dusk quickly enveloped the campus. Trisha had been studying for midterms in the library and now she made her way down the path that led to her dormitory. She briefly thought about getting off campus housing the following year, but then her mind shifted to Joe. She looked up at the campus streetlights. They would be coming on in the next few minutes, however between the uncomfortable bridge between day and night they did not shine. It seemed they had a mind of their own, each trying to decide between light and dark, until one by one they would give in and flare bright. She loved Joe, but Joe seemed always wrapped in the deep, personal pain of a family gone awry. She thought, when you grow up abused you are damaged. Trisha did not want to think that way, but what could she do? Was she relying on what she had been taught or what she knew? Was what she was debating the truth or just a shortcut assumption her mind made like so many others? Maybe she was afraid to see the truth. Maybe she just did not want to think about it anymore. As Trisha strolled down the path, she noticed the shrubs and trees, how they cast a shadowed claim on the ground she walked. She had been debating whether or not to break it off permanently with Joe. She had been approached several times by other young gentlemen while at school and her answer was always no. Now she debated on changing her mind and the answer. Page 109. Trisha in deep thought watched the overarching trees and the shadows they and the bushes made. She heard a shallow soft rustle near a tree and then the quick movement of one of those stray shadows. She stopped for a moment and looked about. Did she see a shadow just move? Trisha looked around, she was alone. She felt alone. Trisha shifted her book bag to the other shoulder and feeling uneasy quickened her pace. Again, she heard a rustle. One by one the campus street lights began to flicker on. Trisha took a deep breath and turned next to one of the big pine trees lining the path to her dormitory. In an instant, a hand grabbed her from behind, pulling her behind the tree, and as the street lights flooded the night with fire, the sound of a gunshot echoed, a bullet piercing through the back of her skull, exiting her forehead. Trisha fell broken, blood and bone everywhere. A young man not truly understanding what he had done quickly ran away into the night, avoiding the light. Joseph entered the hospital. There a couple of police officers met him. There he was told that he should go down to the precinct for questioning on the murder of his girlfriend. In astonishment, he quickly prioritized his scattered thoughts through the fear, through the terror and hurt, and told the front desk to tell his mother that he would be back later. The officers gave him a ride downtown. He was placed in a small room with a cup of coffee and told to wait. After quite some time sobbing, crying, and alone, he was formally questioned. He looked at them with red-shot eyes. Listen, how could I murder my girlfriend? I was on the road rushing to see my mother die from cancer. Tanya was enraged. You gave him the gun. You gave him the gun. David pulled the car over at a gas station. Listen, I need to get some gas and... Page 110. Beer. You want to calm down and let me go? She pushed him from her front passenger seat. I can't believe you did this. They'll pin everything on that boy. David reached over to her, grabbing her shoulder hard. You need to keep everything quiet, pushing down, his fingers pressing into her arm. Like I said, calm down and forget about the gun. Tanya wincing in pain, buckling a bit. David, you're hurting me. Donna looked at her watch. She had been sitting with Danny next to his mother for over 2 hours. The doctors had informed Danny that because Mrs. Cruse's condition was rapidly deteriorating, they would transfer her to the intensive care unit. 2 transporters came over, one saying to both Danny and Donna as they stood up, "We're here to transfer her to the ICU." Danny looked over to Donna. "What should I do?" Donna peered over to Mrs. Cruse, who now was wearing an oxygen mask, was hooked up to various equipment and had N4 inserted into her arm. Go up with them. To the ICU. Danny pulled at one of the transporters. Do I go with you guys? The transporter nodded, unlocking the wheel brakes of the bed. You can for now. But then you have to leave so the doctors can treat her. Danny became even more nervous. Where do I go then? They began to wheel Mama Cruse away. You can wait in the lobby here, or go. Page 111. Home until tomorrow. Donna began to walk away, down the hall and toward the main entrance. Danny went to go with her, then stopped. Donna then went to follow his mother, still looking back. She was already gone, and now he felt so very alone. Susan tried to call Trisha again, but she did not answer her phone. Susan couldn't figure out why, and she was worried. It was past midnight and she was afraid for Trisha. And for herself. Could something have happened to her, she thought to herself? Unable to sit put on her couch, she flicked through TV. She missed her boyfriend, and the police had complicated everything. She tried to say as little as possible to them, but they kept their heat on her. Susan did not want any of it, but she got it all, shovels full, she thought to herself. She tried dialing Trisha's number again and was going to leave a voicemail, but then thought better of it. What if something happened to her, Susan thought, and then she left a voicemail and the police found out. Susan closed her cell phone, placed it on an end table, went to her kitchen and found a bottle of ibuprofen. She took two and went back to her couch. She had such a headache. Susan closed her eyes, once, twice, and then fell fast asleep. She awoke a few hours later. Startled, she looked at the wall clock, which was illuminated by the television playing an early morning infomercial. The clock read 3 a.m. She picked up her phone and this time called Tanya. After several rings, Tanya picked up the phone, still half asleep. Hey. I need to see you. Tanya rolled over in her bed, turning on the light. Why? Susan wanted to talk on the phone, but she did not feel safe, and seeing her seemed the best thing to do when she really did not know what to do. I can't talk on the page 112. Phone, I need to see you. Tanya sat up, now concerned. Well, I can't see you and I really can't talk on the phone. Listen, Susan, call me some other time, it's still early. Susan pleaded, but, Tanya, the phone disconnecting at the other end. Tanya had hung up. Susan called again, but this time there was no answer. There Susan sat, unsure what she could do, then deciding to go pay a visit to Tanya anyway. Susan pulled up to the lower Greenberg sidewalk, put her car in park and hurriedly slammed the driver's side door behind her. She rushed up the street toward Tanya's apartment. It was still dark out and cold. The morning chill had begun to set in. As autumn began to work its way toward the fullness of its season. She shook a bit, partly from the cold and partly from the fear in her heart. She knocked on Tanya's door, waited, and then knocked again when there was no answer. She waited for another minute or two, and knocked again. Still, there was no answer. Susan sighed, brushed her hair back and headed back to her car. As Susan looked over her shoulder, she could see the faint glimmer of a sunrise, red and then turning yellow bright. It was inviting to her, and she felt the fear she held inside her begin to fade. Joseph was allowed to leave the precinct. Once he was free to go, Joseph got back into his car and headed for the hospital again. Once he got there, he entered, seeing the patient registrar. I need to see my mother. The registrar asked for the person's name, who he was, then she looked it up and looked up at him. She is in ICU, handing him a clip to wear. Here, take this, and when you go to the ICU, ask to see the charge nurse first. It's on the 3rd floor, take the elevator. Page 113. Up other there and follow the signs. Joseph nodded, putting on the clip, okay, as he made his way to the elevator. He stepped in and pressed the 3rd floor button. The doors closed, and when they opened, he stepped out and down the corridor. Joe found a waiting area near a set of double doors. He looked around and found his brother sitting there. Danny had his head buried in his hands. Joseph sat next to him. Danny did not seem to notice him. To Joe, Danny did not seem to be crying, perhaps he was asleep. Joseph shook Danny a bit. Danny pulled his head up from his hands, turning to his brother, "Oh, Jojo," rubbing his eyes. "Mama is doing really bad." Joseph looked into his brother's eyes. "You look tired, Danny. I need to take you home." Danny shook his head. "No. Mama needs us." "Look," Joseph putting his hand on Danny's shoulder, "there is nothing we can do. Let me go see the nurse, and then if we need to we'll go home and come back." "Okay, Jojo." Joe left his brother and walked through one set of double doors, then another. He went over to the charge nurse. "My mother is in here." She then went over to a mobile kiosk and called up a screen name. Joe looked at the units, each one with a patient in them, all very ill arrayed. Around each bed was various equipment. It all looked like too much to Joe, too sad. Each patient looked too sick. He wanted to go home. He wanted to take his mother home, and he wanted to take Trisha in his arms and say he was sorry. Why was all this happening? Maybe he should have never met up again with Kevin. He was only trying to help, and it, page 114, seemed to all turn to dust. The nurse looked up at him again. "Name, sir?" "Her name." Joseph rubbed his chin. "Betty Cruse." The nurse looked her up and then gave a quick glance at Joseph. "Okay, you're her son." Joseph talked with the nurse, the doctor on call, and then sat briefly with his mother. She was connected to a variety of equipment. She seemed flaccid and her color was gone. She looked so very pale. Joe took her hand. It was warm, but not as warm as when she was home. Mama Cruse was sleeping, and when Joe took her hand, she briefly opened her eyes, smiled, and drifted back off to sleep. Joseph said a quick prayer and then left to go get Danny, still waiting for him. Danny looked up from his hands again. "She is not doing good, Jojo?" Joe shook his head. "No, Danny, and I don't think she will be getting any better. Complicating everything is that she only has one kidney, and they were factoring in all the psychotropics she had been taking." Danny sat a bit more upright. "She's still taking her pills?" Joe motioned for his brother to get up, which he did, a bit stiffly from sitting too long. "No, in her condition it will hinder her more than help." The biggest one they were worried about was the lithium. They needed to titrate it down so her kidney could deal with other stuff, I suppose. Right now they just got her on plain Haldol, which will give her some rest as well. They are giving it to her through her page 115. Danny made a wrinkled face. "Oh, nasty stuff." Joseph shook his head. "No. Come on, Danny, let's go home. There is nothing we can do right now." Then he put his arm around his brother, which was no small feat. Considering his size, Haldol still has its place in the world, and you know what they say. "Danny, there is nothing new under the sun." Tanya got up early that morning, left David's bed, took a shower, got dressed and made a quick cup of coffee. David had asked her where she was going, and she brushed the question off. Now he asked a second time as she took a sip of her coffee in the kitchen, lighting a cigarette and taking a drag. Where are you going, Ton? Tanya took another puff, exhaled and drank a final good swallow of coffee. I need to head out, you know I do have an apartment of my own to keep up. David gave her a kiss on the cheek. I thought you wanted me 24/7. Tanya gently pushed him away, hardly, and then went to the living room to slip her shoes on and leave. I will be back later. Tanya walked toward her car, which was parallel parked about 2 blocks from David's apartment, on Broadway this time. It was cold that morning and Tanya found herself wishing she had worn a long-sleeve shirt or blouse. Down the road a bit she saw Paco in his wheelchair. She frowned and tried to avoid him, but he came wheeling up to her, confidently blocking her way. Paco held out his hand. You got a smoke? Tanya grabbed her pack of cigarettes and looked inside. There were only a few left. You know you're a real pain in the ass. Page 116. Paco smiled. I sit all day, chica, then holding his hand out again, got a smoke? I see, got one for me. Tanya pulled a cigarette out and gave it to him. Here, now leave me alone. Paco took it and placed it between his lips. You got a light too for Paco, chica? Tanya looked about. There was no one on the street except Paco. She thought to herself, why? Here, she pulled out a lighter, gave him a light and then, now can I go? Paco rolled his wheelchair back. I only bother the ones I love, my friend. Brushing his long white hair back, smiling, happily puffing on his cigarette, it's cold, my friend, you should wear a sweatshirt like me. Tanya nodded, in part irritation and in part agreement. Yeah, Pac, okay. She walked by, getting to her car, put the key into the door, unlocking it, and thought to herself. How odd it seemed that the old man said that he cared. She did not think he ever said something like that to anyone before. The thought worried her, but she brushed it aside. She had something she desperately needed to do. Tanya walked into the Greenberg police precinct. She walked over to the front desk and through the thick glass portal, the police officer spoke to her. Can I help you, ma'am? Tanya took a deep breath. Yes, I know information about a murder and who did it. Page 117. Donna pulled up to her apartment. She grabbed her purse, her phone, and closed the driver's side door behind her. She glanced up at the sun and the glare caught her eyes. She winced in pain and lowered her head. She felt dizzy and had a pounding headache. Donna turned and slumped to the car, leaning on it. She rested on her head where the car door met the frame. Donna rubbed her head and her eyes and then she opened the car door again, only to fall back onto the driver's seat. She opened her cell phone and looked through the numbers. She found David's number, hesitantly called him, and as soon as he answered she blurted out, "Hello, this David?" David questioned. "Who is this?" "David, this is Omar's friend Donna, remember?" He could hear David shuffle in the background. "Yeah, I remember." Omar had no friends. "What do you want with me?" "I am busy." Donna swallowed. "You know he was my dealer. I need a hit really bad." "Bad for you. I don't deal direct." Donna, almost in tears, resting on her head on the steering wheel, her hair limply falling. "Listen, I will pay you real good and do what you need. I was reliable, please, I need something. You know where the pool hall is on Broadway?" Donna nodded her head while it was still on the steering wheel. "Yeah. Go over there around 6. Donna pulled her head up, angrily, "But that is too long." "Hey, you want a dime, you wait." Page 118. Donna wiping some tears from her face. Okay, as David hung up. Donna dropped the phone and began to cry in her hands. She pulled out some tissue from the glove compartment box and wiped her nose. Donna thought to herself, why did she have to be that way? She thought maybe after this last hit she would go into a rehab, make a better life for herself. Donna thought maybe she could move away, start fresh, just one more hit and what she needed to get it, that was all she needed. Chapter 9. Joe and Danny were eating breakfast a bit late, but then again after what went on the night before, who could blame them? They had eggs and toast. Danny loved eggs. Unfortunately, you could only make him so many, because he would eat the whole carton if you let him. Joseph sipped his coffee, then Danny, seeing him, did the same. Danny, I want you to know you're a good brother, okay? Danny finished his eggs and ate the last piece of toast. I feel bad, a bad brother. Jojo. I ain't too smart and take up all your time. I never let you have any fun. Joe laughed warmly. No, Danny, we're a family. Who says what is normal, what is the best way to be? We live in a trailer, so what? Why, because Daddy wasn't there. We have a mother who takes medicine, so, you know how many people do? She got cancer. You know how many people do? Danny looked down for a moment. They don't have brothers like me, you know, special. Joseph sighed and thought for a moment, it must be hard for him sometimes. Page 119. He never really thought about it from the other end of life. You know, Danny, we all have our limitations. If it's not one thing, it's another. You just don't hear about it much. Because people don't talk about it as an everyday type casual thing, they hide it. Danny finished his coffee. What do you mean, Jojo? Well, when I first meet someone, she doesn't say to me, "Hi, I am Jane Doe, nice to meet you. I have high cholesterol and my mother is a diabetic," and I don't say, "Nice to meet you, Jane, I am Joe and I have arthritis in my knee, because I chipped it years ago. And heart disease runs in my family." Danny seemed surprised. Does it? Joe fiddled with his cup. No, Danny, we don't have heart disease in our family, I guess cancer, but look, we live in stained glass houses. They look great. We all look great. Until you get in and sit down. Once you sit down you realize the floorboards are rotting. There is no heat in winter and the carpet has tape on it to keep it together. Danny was trying to absorb as much of it as he could. Ah, okay. You mean people seem better than they are for real? Joe nodded. Yes, but you, my friends, are who you are. What you seem to be is what you really are. If that makes sense. Danny smiled. That's good, Joe, Joe, right? Oh, yeah, Danny, you bet it is. Just then the house phone rang. Joe reached over to the kitchen wall and picked it up. Hello, then, yes, this is Joseph Cruse, then. Closing his eyes, okay. He hung up the phone and looked sadly at his brother. Listen, I need to go and see Mama, she is going, Danny. Danny turned away. Oh. Page 120. Do you want to go with me? Danny turned back to his brother. I never seen anyone pass before, Jojo. Let alone Mama. Do you want to go with me to see her? Danny gave a faraway look, out to a place only he knew, and then returned. Looking into his brother's eyes, scrunching his face. No, Jojo. I need to be alone. I will see her pretty up the way she always used to be at the wake. Joseph nodded his head, gave Danny some cash to get something to eat at Cruse. If he got hungry, grabbed his keys and headed out to his car. He thought about what Danny had said. Although he could force his brother to go, the shock could be too much for him. Sometimes, Danny amazed him, sometimes he thought Danny was the smartest person he ever met. Tanya got in her car. She locked her doors and put the key in the ignition. She started the car and pulled out her phone. Her palms were sweaty and she was worried. She wiped her hands on her jeans and gave Susan a call. Susan. Susan answered. Tanya, I thought you didn't want to talk to me. Tanya pulled out of the precinct parking lot. I know, listen, things are going down quick. We can meet at the pool hall and find a way out of this. Okay. Meet me there around 6, okay? Yeah, okay. Page 121. Tanya set the phone down and drove off to her apartment to wait for a while before heading back out. Well, she thought to herself, I could always go back down to South Carolina. Danny, left all alone to himself, just sat there on the couch looking at the television, which wasn't turned on this time. He did not want to watch any sports. He did not feel like doing much of anything. What Danny wanted was his mother home, but she would never be coming home. Danny remembered when he was a child, his mother was so strong then. They used to have to walk for a lot of their food, but she always used to buy a box of donuts and milk along the way and share them with both Danny and Joseph. She used to say to them when they were kids, someday you two will have just each other, that is why I had you both. Now it seems that it was going to come true. Danny thought about the kids that used to pick on him in school, told him he was dumb and had a welfare mom. They didn't seem to realize it was the heart that mattered. And when a father who made very good money left, what was a mother to do? It was not Mama's fault, she was sick. She needed medicine and it almost never worked the way it should have, at least no with her. It never made her better to the point of being completely healthy. The medicine worked for a while, then it didn't, or it did and then she took herself off and it didn't. When the medicine didn't or when she took herself off, Mama Cruse said mean things too, like the school kids, but she was an adult and their mom. Which made it worse for him. Danny thought it made it worse for Joseph too. There were times when Mom just would not speak, or she would scream for days and Danny would hear Joseph crying in his bedroom. Sometimes Danny would take a peek to see what was really going on and sure enough, he always would find his brother crying. He asked himself why he never had the courage to go in when Joe was crying and tell him it would. Page 122. Be okay, that he loved him. It all just seemed so complicated to Danny and he found himself struggling to make sense of it all. He thought to himself, well, it's over, no more, and our mama is gone. Thinking about it all, Danny began to cry. He cried for several moments and then, with a bit or resolve, wiped his eyes with his shirt, went to the kitchen counter and found the money Joseph gave him. Danny decided he would go to the tavern and eat. Maybe Michael would have something nice to say to him. He was a good friend, a very good friend. Danny sheepishly walked into Cruse Tavern. Michael was busy behind the bar, cleaning glasses. Seeing Danny, he wiped his hands on a dish towel and waved him in. Hey, Danny, come over. Danny frowned a bit then sat down at the bar. Mike, seeing the pain on his face, what's going on, Danny? Is it your mom? Danny nodded. What's wrong? She in the hospital again. Danny pulled out his money. She is dying, forlornly counting the money to himself. Mike grabbed Danny's hands to stop him from picking at the dollars. Danny. What do you mean? It's that bad. Danny looked up and almost in tears, yes, she won't make tonight, I think. Mike took a deep breath and rubbed his beard. Listen, go sit at a booth. I will bring you a chocolate shake, a burger, and fries. You'll owe me later. Danny grabbed his money, stood and sat in a corner booth. There he shrunk into the corner and into the padded seat. He wished he had gone with his brother to see his. Page 123. Mom. He had made a mistake. David flipped through the channels, nothing seemed to be on. He looked around and found a half-full beer. He took a sip, leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. Just as he closed his eyes, he heard a loud knock at the door downstairs. It sounded heavy and important. David ran down the steps, looking through the keyhole. The small image produced 4 officers in uniform and 2 plainclothes detectives. Who is it? One of the officers spoke out. This is the police. We need to talk to you. David, now anxious. Who do you need to see? David. Then they shuffled a bit outside, nodding to themselves. We would like to talk to you. We have a warrant out for your arrest. David thought quickly, even though he was fully clothed. Yeah, I am, but naked. I need to get on some drawers at least. Then running upstairs, he ran to his bedroom and locked the door behind him. The officers pulled their pistols and one split the door open with a well-placed boot to it. They rushed up the stairs as David found his second gun and jumped out the window. He stumbled down the fire escape, rushed through his small backyard, climbed over the fence and ran. Donna rifled through the clothes at a local boutique. She kept her sunglasses low. Her headache now pouring down her forehead and through her back. Donna could not stop shaking and she was very nauseous. She felt she needed to vomit, but held the bile in. She didn't have much money on her, with Jake her main John and the fact that he kept. Page 124. Her well, she didn't worry for much. Now she thought she may have to hit the dark streets again, and she did not relish that fact. Donna, struggling to stand, found a seat. She pulled out her phone and called Danny. Danny's home phone rang once, twice, then several times. And yet there was no answer. She thought for a moment, carefully stood up and headed out the shop to her car. There is no best way to pass, there is no good place to die. No time is right. No reason is sufficient to make someone feel better about a loved one leaving family and friends behind. There Joseph sat, next to his mother, holding her hand. She was sedated now and her breathing was shallow. The curtain was partially closed behind them to give Joseph some privacy, even though the intensive care unit gave none. He felt so conflicted. She was a good mother, but she had her bad moments, maybe more than some, less than others. He remembered how as a child she would go into a rage and scream. Joe would go outside and play. One day he found an ant pile and there he saw how they all worked together, how each was treated the same. It seemed so rational, so calm those ants were, so reasonable to one another, so normal. Of course, they were ants and he was a little boy, but why couldn't the world function in such an orderly way? Why did animals treat each other better than humans? Why could God forgive you, but another human being could not? Maybe, that is why he had such a hard time with God. He didn't understand. Maybe he would find the answers as time went on, for now he was with his mother and his mother was with him. Joseph leaned over to her and rubbed her hair. It was soft. He smiled a bit and then tears began to stream down his face. A hard life had taken its toll on her and he Found himself wanting to try life again, but he could not. He wiped the tears from his page 125 face, brushed her cheek and whispered into her ear, "You were a good mama. You raised your kids good. I love you, Danny loves you very much," then gave her a kiss on the forehead. Joseph would make it right. He would not take the path his family had taken, but another. He would break that mountain in two. Michael came out with Danny's burger and fried, placing the plate on the table. "There you go, Danny." Danny reluctantly eyed the burger and began to nibble on the fries. "Thank you. You know you and your brother did all you could." Danny looked up unsure. "Yeah." Michael nodded, rubbing his white beard, then his hands on his apron. "You know. I know your mom, since we were kids." Danny took another French fry. "Yeah." Mike remembered back. "In fact, I remember your mother's mother. She was very bad to your mother. Your mother didn't want any part of it as she got older and the family wouldn't have it, so they left her to herself to raise you guys," turning to head back to the bar. "Danny, she did well raising you guys. I mean, just look at you guys now." Danny looked down at his plate thinking, "Look at us now." As he thought those words, the tavern door opened and Donna walked in. She had her sunglasses on and looked worn. She glanced about and found Danny sitting there. She waved at him and Danny waved weakly back. Donna came over, sat down next to him and gave him a kiss on his cheek. "Hello, honey." Page 126. Danny shied away a bit. "Hi." Donna noticing, grabbing his hand and holding it. "Danny, what's wrong?" Danny took a bite of his burger, not looking at her. "You left me at the hospital. And my mother is dying." Donna let his hand go. She gave a big sigh, rubbing her temples, her jet black hair falling in front of her face. She pushed her hair away. "I know, but there is nothing I can do about it. I am new to the situation, so I just thought I would leave and let you and your brother deal with it. It's your family, not mine." Danny put the burger down. "Okay." Donna rubbed his leg. "Listen, I will make it up to you. I took you to the hospital. Remember? What is going to be is going to be, you need to live for yourself and your brother too." Danny felt Donna's hand on his thigh. Awkwardly he moved a bit away from her. "I know, but we're family. I just don't know you too well, Donna." Michael, seeing this, decided to go over to their table. "Hey there, how are you, Donna?" Donna pulled her hand back from Danny's leg. "I am doing good. I just got a bit of a headache." "I see," then pulling out a pad and pen, "Would you like something to eat?" Donna did not want to eat anything. She wanted to vomit, but nodded. "I will have a cup of chicken soup." "Okay, anything else?" Page 127. She pushed her sunglasses up, her hands shaking. "No." Michael put the pad away. "Okay, it will be out in a few minutes. Danny, if you need anything let me know." Danny looked up, sipping on his milkshake. "Okay." Mike left with a strong glance at Donna. Donna frowned, and then when Mike was gone, "I know, but if I get the help I need, I will be around a long time and we could all be a happy family." Danny looked at her, through her sunglasses. "You're not as sick as my mama, Donna." Donna gave a bit of a shocked smile, the recovering, brushing her hair back. "I am getting there. Why, just look at me, Danny," holding onto Danny's shoulder. "Look, your mother is going to pass away and your brother is going back to college. He is going to Leave and go on with his life. You have me, but what if you all alone? What would you do? Back in that trailer? Who would pay the bills? Who would cook? Who would take you places, keep you company, be your friend? Danny having not thought about that yet. I don't know. Donna opening her purse, taking out some money. Come on, you're not that hungry, neither am I. Let me pay for this and we can take a ride and talk. I'll keep you company until Joe gets back from the hospital. I would rather go to the hospital to be with him and Mom. Donna thought for a moment and then put money down on the table. Yeah, we'll drive, do a couple of quick things and then we will go to the hospital. Page 128. Danny reluctantly agreeing, okay, feeling wrong about the situation. It felt bad. But he was scared and he felt alone. They both then stood up from the booth and left the tavern. Michael had briefly stepped back into the kitchen to get the soup. When he returned with it he found money on Danny's table, but both of them were gone. Seeing this, Michael became worried. He became very worried. David met up with Jamal. I need your car. Jamal was sitting on the stoop of his apartment, David looking around quickly, covering his head with a hooded sweatshirt. Why? You in trouble? David shook his head. No. No, let me borrow your car, mine's is getting fixed. I bring it back tonight with a full tank of gas. Jamal pulled out his car keys. You sure you ain't in trouble? I mean Omar and shit. David held his hand out nervously. No, that kid hit Omar and some woman. I don't know, there are a lot of crazy people out there. Ideal, but I ain't a gangbanger. Jamal thought about the full tank of gas. It's almost on empty. What did I just say? Well, okay, just saying, tossing him the keys, don't wreck it. David took the keys and as he left to hop into the car. Jamal, this thing has been around since the 70s. Jamal watched as he pulled out, just saying, then pulled at his jacket. It was page 129. Getting colder with each passing day. David kept thinking to himself, I know I will find you, bitch, I will find you. He drove around a bit aimlessly, but as his anger and fear began to solidify he became more rational. David decided he would look at a few places and then go to the pool hall. Tanya could have gone there as well. If she wasn't there he would wait until the evening and go to her apartment using the fire escape to see if she was there instead. Things were too hot right then for him to go to her apartment directly. He would have to wait, but in the meantime, he could check a few of the places she frequented. Maybe he would spot her on the street. Once he found her, he would have a talk and then split that town and go out of state where the police wouldn't find him. Joe walked down the hallways of the hospital. There he found himself a place to sit and took it. He was tired, wiping his face with his sleeve. He felt like he needed to wash his hands, his face, but he did not. Joseph wondered what he would do in the coming days, all the plans he would have to make. He wondered what he would do after all those plans had been finished. What do you do when the quiet comes? What do you do when you wake up at night feeling alone and feeling like you failed your life? You were given a life to live and you failed at living it. How hard the world was, Joe thought to himself. How many times they walked to get food, in the heat, in the rain and in the snow. Yet no one would pick them up, not even when a relative would drive by. His relatives would honk and wave from their air-conditioned car, but would not take them that last mile home when they had blisters on their feet. Joseph knew he had to live for himself. He had to not because he had to be cold to those in need, but because if he destroyed himself helping others, would they get him back on his feet? Would anyone take care of? Page 130. Himself like himself? Seemed like a simple question, though it had profound answers. It wasn't that you didn't want to help others, but in the end if you could not help yourself, to what good would your help be to someone else? Joe stretched out on the chair, leaning back. Joe took out his cell phone. He shook his head in disbelief. He could not help others who would not help themselves, who made excuses as to why they could not move an inch. There were plenty of good, reasonable reasons why someone could not do something, but those reasons, which were tossed into the wind like so many butterflies making their yearly migration, those so casual excuses, ready-made in the pocket, to be pulled out at a moment's notice, then forming an iron wall to thwart those who care, were to be walked away from. No, he would not help those people because they wanted to be just the way they were. Seemed to Joe for some reason those people who needed help got a benefit from suffering while he lost. Joe would not be one of those people anymore, and he would not help people like that anymore. No one would give him a slice of bread first unless he tried first to provide it to himself. If he failed, then so be it, but at least he took the chance to live. What happened to Kevin? Why? Why did he destroy himself? He told Kevin in high school not to mess with certain people, not to go drinking. They had their group. Why was it not enough? Joseph told Kevin, they all had it rough, that he was not alone. Why did he not believe him? Maybe it was because Joe thought he was alone himself, and who could believe a liar when it is written on the person's face? Joe was sick of it, he was done. He had been brought to this crossroads and it had lasted several months. Now he would take the narrow road. The road less traveled. Joseph let out a strange laugh, went into one of the hospital bathrooms, looked in the mirror, washed his hands, his face, and then wet his hair a bit. Joe looked in the mirror again, dried himself, left the bathroom and pulled out his phone again. He called home. Joseph let it ring a few. Page 131. Times, but there was no answer. He sat for several minutes becoming a bit worried and then called again, but there was still no answer. Joe put the phone back in his pocket and left the hospital. David drove for a while, traveling from street to street. He then went to a gas station, bought a pack of cigarettes, a beer, and went to part of the waterfront which was somewhat deserted. David sat there for several minutes, drinking his beer and smoking. When he was finished with the beer and halfway finished with his pack, he decided to look for Tanya again. It was getting late. At that point, he did not care about dealing. He was a wanted man, but he did care about grabbing the woman who destroyed his life. David put the car in reverse and then drove off again. He drove down one street and then another, mindful of any police cars or unmarked vehicles. As he drove, he felt panic well up in him. Joe quickly pulled up to his trailer. He got out, put the key in the door lock, turned it, opened the door and glanced in. He found no one. Joe hurried down into the back of the trailer and looked into the bathroom, still he did not find his brother. Concerned, he thought about Donna. Joseph went back up to the kitchen and found the money gone. He rubbed his chin, closed and locked the trailer door behind him and went over to the tavern. When are we going to get to the hospital, Donna? Donna gave Danny a quick glance as she drove around. We will get there. We just need to stop by a place where me and a few friends are to meet. I need to talk to them. Page 132. For a moment and then we will be there. Danny squirmed in his seat a bit. But, Jojo will be worried and Mama is sick. Donna gave him a fierce look. You know I am sick too. We all have problems. Danny turned away, looking out his passenger side window. Can I use your phone to call, Jojo? No, Donna said abruptly as they pulled onto a side street next to the pool hall. Let's go. There she was. There was Tanya, rushing down Broadway to the pool hall. David gritted his teeth. He was enraged. He could see her. He could see another car, a Thunderbird. David could see two unmarked police cars double parked. Anger and fear. Anxiety and hate began to swell in his chest, then down and up through his body. He began to shake, to sweat, eyes wide. David abruptly pulled off to the side of the road. Fuck you, fuck the cops, fuck all of you, then quietly to himself, every last one of you. Danny got out of the car. Where are we going? Donna got out and closed the driver's side door behind her, pointing a block down the street. Right there. Danny could hear a car driving up the street, as they walked. Donna, you. No. Page 133. She could see one car pull quickly up to the curb, on the other side of the road. It looked like David, but it wasn't his car. He was rushing over. Donna looked down the block and could see Tanya. She was quickly walking to the pool hall. It looked like David was heading right for Tanya. Donna now could hear another car too, this time not David's, but another. She turned to look behind her, it was a van and it was moving fast. What, Danny, what? Danny turned to see the van as well, it was racing towards them, now concerned about the vehicle. Donna, the car, pointing as it barreled toward them, almost at her. Tanya turned to see what was occurring and then saw David racing toward her. She began to run. Donna shocked, shit, both of them running, the van swerving, aiming right for Donna. She broke from Danny's side and tried to reach the safety of the brownstone apartment walls, but could not outrun the car. The van jumped the curb, clipping her legs. She screamed as the van went up over her, its front left wheel, pulling her under, crushing her back, then pulling away, speeding down the road. Danny stopped, turned, and ran over to her. There Donna lay in a pool of blood. He kneeled down in shock, crying, scooping her up. Donna. She turned her head. Danny. Danny held her close. Donna, I am sorry. I am sorry. One of the officers leaped out of the patrol car. Shit, we're going in. Several other police officers and detectives rushing out, pulling their weapons. David rushed toward Tanya. He looked back at the unmarked cars, grabbing Tanya. You're coming with me. Page 134. Tanya screamed. Get off me. David pulled her into the pool hall. Come on. Donna opened her eyes, went to say something, but the pain was intense, taking her breath away. Her body was shattered. She convulsed, clenching her jaw, gritting her teeth. Danny loosened his grip on her. She stopped for a moment, looked at him, went to reach up, convulsed for a second time and collapsed again. Danny gently laid her back down and stood up, turning about, not sure what to do or where to go. He looked at his hands, full of blood. He began to panic, fear setting in. Danny looked down at his shirt and jeans soaked with blood and bile. He could not understand it. He could not understand any of it. Danny's brain began to overload, his chest beginning to get sharp pains, welling up and driving him to insanity. Danny looked around, he needed to hide, to get away, to run and run. He saw the sign of the pool hall and without understanding took the quickest, widest path he could find. He ran for the hall. Danny ran, weeping as he went, stumbling into the hall. There inside was David, Tanya in his grip, Susan by them, pleading. Please. Danny stood shocked, then suddenly becoming unfazed. What is going on? Joseph drove down Broadway, seeing the chaos that was occurring before him. He pulled up to the pool hall. He could see Donna, crumpled and soaked in her own blood. He stumbled out of his car, running for the pool hall. The police just before him. David cocked the gun, holding it to Tanya's temple as the police rushed in. I will kill her. Page 135. Each of the officers arrayed, everyone in the hall frozen in fear, under a table. Behind the bar, locked in the bathroom, in a corner huddled, one officer. Let her go, don't make this any worse, David. Tanya shrieked. Do what he says. Joseph stumbling in, out of breath and between gasps. Danny. David his arm around Tanya's neck, squeezing, as she clutched it. Shut up. Bitch. Danny turned. Jojo. David looked over to him. Who is this stupid shit? Another police officer. Just put the gun down, David, you don't want to hurt her. Susan crying, looking at Tanya, at Joe, and Danny. Please. David, shaking Tanya. Shut up. The police creeping closer, Danny getting a confused look in his eyes, scrunching his face. Mama died, Donna died, everyone dies. David slinking back, dragging Tanya a bit. Shut up. Don't anyone come any closer. Drop the gun. Everyone dies. It's my fault, he looked at Joe, it's my fault, moving in between David and Tanya and the police officers. Joe stepping a bit closer, Danny, the police ordering everyone, get back. Everyone. Page 136. David shaking Tanya. Look at this fool. Danny turned to David, no more, as he moved it toward David. David pushed Tanya out of the way, pointing the pistol at Danny. You fuck. I will kill you. I will. Everyone, get back. Joseph, Danny please. Susan, don't, David, don't. Danny went to grab David's gun, then the police rushed David. There were shots. And bodies slumped to the floor. There David lay dead, Danny holding his stomach, blood and intestine in his clutches, the police calling for ambulances, seeing if David was alive. And then doing what they could for Danny. Joe went to Danny, but an officer held him back. I am his brother. Let me see him, the officer releasing him, several other officers rushing back to the cars to get their emergency kits. Joseph kneeled down to Danny, as the police tried to pack the wound with what was available, until the kits were brought in from the cars. Danny, why? Danny rolling in pain, now in a near ball, clutching himself. Jojo, I never helped you. I saw you cry all the time and let you. Joseph grabbing Danny, turning him and his face to him. What? What do you mean? Danny rolling, the officers trying to pull his arms and hands from the wound. Blood pouring out, the officer yelling, let go, Danny, let go of your stomach. Danny. Looking at his brother, spasming, arching his back in shock, I was stupid. I was dumb. Joe. Page 137. Joe holding his head. Danny. Danny gritting his teeth, shaking, getting limp. Joe, Joe. Joe knowing, yes, Danny. Danny shaking, rolling a bit, stiffening, then limp again, love, then turned his body, then bled away. Joe shook him, Danny, there was no response, Daniel, the police grabbing Danny, starting CPR on him, taking him from Joe. Joseph standing covered in blood. He looked at his hands, looked at Susan and Tanya, then David, his hands again, then finally at Danny, the officers pounding on his chest, I love you too. Danny was not dumb, Joe. Whispering to himself, brother, you were the smartest man I ever knew. A winter, a spring, a few seasons of change, each day passed into the night and the morning sun rose again to meet the horizon. Joseph rolled down the windows of his car. As he drove along, he looked in the side mirror, the rear view mirror, and then up out onto the long road ahead. It stretched for many miles, the grass green, the trees budding in the background. Joseph took a deep breath, the air sweet with new life. He had a destination to go to, what lie in the background, beyond the hills. Joe looked at the dash, then at the passenger seat where his backpack lay. He looked out to the sun rise up and over the wane of nighttime. The highway was free of traffic. The road was clear. The path was clear. He had a feeling that day was going to be a very good day.